Okay, so this one is spontaneous, but I think important because it covers issues that I've referred to before. I'm just going to read out the article. It's not excessively long, so bear with me. This is from the Times today, well, yesterday, December the 21st, 2021. And the reporter is John Simpson, who's a crime correspondent for the Times. A retired policeman visited by his local force after tweeting about transgender rights has won a battle over free speech after judges said his treatment could have a chilling effect on public debate. The Court of Appeal ruled unanimously yesterday that the hate crime operational guidance from the College of Policing unlawfully breached Harry Miller's human rights. The ruling could call into question thousands of other matters recorded since the guidance was issued in 2014. Miller, 56, was told by an officer from Humberside Police who visited his workplace in January 2019. I remember reading about this case at the time. "I'm here to check your thinking." And that's in quotes. Force was compared by a High Court judge to the Stasi or the Gestapo at a hearing last February. That's coming from a High Court judge. Miller's 31 tweets included a limerick about transgender women having male privilege, and one saying, "I was assigned mammal at birth, but my orientation is fish. Don't misspecies me." Non-crime hate incidents, as his was designated, are recorded by police but do not constitute a criminal record. They are not disclosed on ordinary criminal record certificates but will show on an enhanced search. The report created by the force described Miller as a suspect and the woman who reported him as the victim, stating that Miller had been posting transphobic comments on Twitter, causing offence and showing hatred for the transgender community. Speaking outside court yesterday, Miller said common sense has finally been restored. He had to go to the long route round and get rid of the guidance because chief constables are too stupid or morally bankrupt or intellectually bankrupt to know what is the right thing to do. In his witness statement, Miller said that he had never been antagonistic towards those who self-identify as a gender which is contrary to their biological sex, and believed people had the right to present and perform in any way they choose. But he added, "A biological man is a biological man, and a biological woman is a biological woman. To claim otherwise is extraordinary. Extraordinary claims require both extraordinary evidence and extraordinary scrutiny prior to becoming law." Last year, the High Court ruled that the force had acted disproportionately and interfered with Miller's freedom of speech. His further claim that the guidelines were unlawful was rejected. The Court of Appeal said, however, that subsequent revisions to the guidelines had not gone far enough. Dame Victoria Sharp said in the ruling, "There is nothing excluding irrational complaints, including those where there is no evidence of hostility, and little, if anything, to address the chilling effect which this may have on the legitimate exercise of freedom of expression." Aim Raphael of the College of Policing said it aimed to balance freedom of speech with protecting the vulnerable and would review the judgment and make any changes necessary. And just a bit more on this non-criminal hate in the inbox. College of Policing guidance defined a hate incident as one which the victim or anyone else thinks is based on prejudice towards them because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or because they are transgender. It was criminal if an offence like assault was committed. More than 87,000 non-crime hate incidents were recorded in England and Wales from 2014 to 2019. Okay, so this guy has had a 3-year ordeal um, of trying to clear his name. Former police officer, so he obviously has some knowledge of legal matters. Um, I think that firstly, it's good that the ruling has found in favour of common sense, but it is also disturbing that a British police force is effectively policing people's minds. I mean, the fact that we turn up to his door and say, and this was in quotes, "I'm here to check your thinking." I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that is like the Stasi, like a Gestapo. Um, and I think these guidelines they really need to be either discarded completely if they're not designated as a criminal offence. If they're designated to be a criminal offence, I think that's still very troubling and that should be heavily debated. But if this isn't even designated to be a criminal offence, then really it poses a question, more broadly speaking, why should the police interfere at all? I mean, for an enhanced search, this be, for example, if someone, violently attacks a transgender person, which would be assault, check their background to see if they have a record of, spewing hatred against the transgender community. Would that be the purpose? I think if it's not designated as a criminal offence, it poses a question why it's there at all. In a free society, there has to be the freedom to offend, basically. And that might sound, some people might question that, but you cannot censor freedom of expression just so it's nice and rosy and everyone agrees with it. Some opinions will be contentious. Now, I've often criticised our justice system and the Court of Appeal. On this occasion, they've ruled in favour of common sense. But this was a high-profile case. How many other cases out there might get less exposure? I mean, I have a lot of questions about this. Humberside Police, do they have nothing better to do? That force covers a big city, Hull. I'm sure on a given night in Hull, there's plenty of assaults or drunken disorderly conduct. Like any city in the country, it's going to have plenty of serious crimes. So knocking on a guy's door and asking him how he thinks about something does not seem like a priority. So either Humberside Police is plain incompetent, or they've got the priorities wrong, or it's actually part of a pattern of behaviour among Britain's police forces. I do seriously question what direction we're going in. If this is what police superintendents, if this is what they're looking at, um, I don't blame ordinary officers so much. They're just doing the job. They have to do what they're, told to do. But it's senior officers who are making these decisions. That's one factor. That's the police side of things. I think they've got the priorities wrong, and I think the College of Policing guidance is, it seriously needs to be reviewed or amended or just cancelled altogether on this issue. I mean, 87,000 non-crime hate incidents. I frankly read that as 87,000 cases of people being overly sensitive and trying to criminalize people whose opinions they don't like. Now, the important thing in this case was these were public tweets. This was not aimed at any individual. I could understand some implications if he was targeting an individual sort of bullying campaign. But this was just generic posts. And he was saying what, frankly, a lot, if not most people think. Most people, I think, really, when pushed, would say a biological man is a biological man, a biological woman is a biological woman. But I think because the trans lobby has got so militant and so vocal, people are getting intimidated by them. For a lobby that claims to be victims, they do a lot of victimizing themselves, by which I mean their obnoxious cancel culture, their aggressive treatment of women, particularly who don't agree with them. The most high profile example of this is J.K. Rowling. A mob of militant trans activists gathered outside her Edinburgh house recently. In the States, apparently a Quidditch game is wanting to distance itself from J.K. Rowling. What these hypocrites need to understand is without this woman's creativity, nothing connected to Harry Potter would be there. Nothing. So it's just obnoxious in the extreme. I mean, I think it is chilling to say that because someone holds an opinion that someone else, well, let's be specific, a marginalized group finds objectionable, then let's just, take away free speech. So I can say I believe in biology. a transgender person watching this video might, object to that and say, I'm a transphobic person. I'm spewing hate against the transgender community, which I've never done. But it has chilling consequences. I mean, I just hope that this case calls other cases into question where perhaps there's ongoing, I mean, because of the pandemic, trials have been suspended anyway. There's been a prolonged state of affairs with the whole legal system. So I really think that because of that situation, the priority needs to be made for victims of actual crimes. I mean, these aren't actually, this isn't just my opinion, they're not actually crimes. So why are we spending resources even, why are police forces spending time investigating them? I mean, how much is this clogging up the legal system? A legal system that would be much better invested in investigating, violent assaults, burglaries, arson, rape, these serious life-changing crimes, and indeed transgender people who may have been victims of violent assault. Um, so actually, anyone who believes in freedom of expression owe Tari Miller a debt of gratitude because this man's tenacity to hold his ground, to campaign for common sense, it's led to this decision. And without that sort of stoicism, then we might be complacent about it. But I believe, and I've believed for some time now, that freedom of expression is under threat in this country. And a lot of that comes from cyberspace. Now, I'm not naive. There are some very unpleasant things said online. I read earlier about a young woman, a 23-year-old nurse in Wales, who was found littering. And I mean, she was filmed littering. And some busybody put this on social media. Even though she apologized, she admitted that she'd done it. Um, and that was it. But then it went on social media and she was shamed and she took her own life, 23 years old. So that is the other side of it, you know. But I have to say, in that case, it sounds like she probably had pre existing depression and other issues that made her a sensitive and vulnerable person, you know. It's a difficult balancing act because we have a case like this, which in my view is a complete waste of police resources. But of course, bullying has to be tackled, and I think there is a place for kindness. But the thing with the trans debate is, people might say it's cruel to be mocking and ridicule trans ideology. But what I find more concerning is the zealotry of this. Even if you're not joking about it, and for example, you're very sympathetic to people suffering gender dysphoria, um, the idea that, well, you can't have a different opinion because that's transphobic is outrageous. Um, I mean, I do think the trans lobby, backed by Stonewall, they really need to tone it down a bit because they are the bullies right now. The way they're acting is just obnoxious. They can have their opinions. They can, if they believe they're standing up for the right, it's fine. But they need to understand that this witch hunt that they're engaging in, um, they're not going to win any public support with that. They're just not. And in a free society, people have to have the freedom to express views that some might find contentious. And I think that's being eroded. I really do. Um, I mean, this case has been won, but I don't think it's unique. Incidentally, on the trans issue, since that is the background subject here, apparently in Thailand, they've made the rules stricter. You have to be 18 to get gender reassignment surgery, and you have to have medical records proving that you suffer from gender dysphoria or another condition in order to have sex reassignment surgery. I think there's an argument to be made that there's too much of this area that isn't looked at. For example, people who have had a gender reassignment surgery, then they regret it. The research that has been done into that, I believe at Newcastle University, has been scaled back, and there's been funding taken away from that sort of research. because I think what's happening here is science is being discarded, right? It's all ideologically based. So people who are suffering gender dysphoria, they're unhappy, they're depressed. They feel they were born in the wrong body. They feel they were misgendered. I genuinely sympathize with them, but I think that we need to work on the science and not, pander to people's mental health problems. I honestly think if we look at other mental health issues, and let's be clear, gender dysphoria is a mental health condition. You don't need to be um, an expert to see that. If someone said they were Napoleon Bonaparte or Queen Victoria, they would probably be diagnosed with some sort of severe delusion. But if a biological man, frankly, wants to amputate his penis because he wants to be a woman, that he's encouraged and he's called a brave woman in doing so. I think we have to have a serious debate about this. There is a lot of ridicule around the issue because, for example, 76 pronouns or whatever. But there is a serious side to this, and it is the threats to freedom of expression and the fact that it's being weaponized. Really, it's being weaponized. Um, and I think there are militant trans activists who they're sort of taking the view we're a minority, we're victims. Anyone who stands on our way is an oppressor. So we need to cancel them. We need to criminalize them. And they're not above using intimidating tactics. There's this sort of internal feud in the left between the so-called trans exclusionary radical feminists and trans activists. I mean, it's in a sense I don't have much sympathy for either side. I've not much time for third wave feminists, but they're being branded extremists simply because they say that biology matters. There are important questions on this. For example, on women's prisons. If you have someone who's biological male and they may or may not have had gender reassignment surgery, there's a whole question of should they be sent to a women's jail. There's changing facilities in sports complexes. There is the issue of competitive sports. There's all sorts of questions around this, which does make it different from other campaigns in the past, for example, on gay rights or racial issues. I think that there is a particular dynamic to the trans issue which does set it apart from other minority struggles, minority campaigns. Um, you know, hopefully this case will be a turning point. Hopefully we will have people in power who roll back against it, and hopefully police forces around the country, because I think this is definitely coming down to their own discretion. I don't think they can say, oh, well, this is Home Office guidelines. This is their own guidelines. College of Policing guidance. This isn't the Home Office dictating this. So this does raise the question of what sort of ideological angle are police forces looking at? Are these public servants fighting crime or are they engaging in culture war battles? I think it's a serious question. Um, Finally, I'm a heterosexual biological guy, right? I haven't had the sort of challenges that a transgender person has been through. I can't pretend I know life in their shoes. Um, and I've enormous sympathy for anyone who goes through that sort of loneliness and severe depression. I mean, it must be awful feeling like you're in the wrong body. But gender dysphoria is a real condition, and I think that it needs to be seriously looked at. As for the idea of transgender children, I think it's an oxymoron because you have to be, as I understand it, and people are free to correct this, but you have to be 16 in England and Wales to have gender reassignment surgery, and that comes on top of living as your intended gender for months. So how a child can be designated transgender, it's just ridiculous. I think you could have a child that might be showing early symptoms of gender dysphoria, But when I hear of the 5-year-old transgender child, how can they be transgender? They cannot legally have a sex change. Um, so I think that's just, I think the wording on this matters. I think transgender should be seen as a legal term, as opposed to just thrown around. Like anyone who feels like they're the opposite sex, oh, they're transgender. But that's actually another problem here. We're now getting to the point where someone can simply say, oh, I'm a woman, and questioning it would be seen as transphobic. I was watching a clip from Beavis and Butthead earlier. Now, it's a bit of a trashy cartoon. It was controversial back in the day in the 1990s. But basically, if you know the cartoon, there's an episode where Beavis and Butthead, they're kind of these, if you don't know the cartoon, they're these juvenile delinquents, but they're boys, and they're teenage boys, they're interested in girls. Anyway, they go into a girls' class, right? The girls are learning about sex education. And I pointed out, that today all Beavis and Butthead would have to do is say, we're girls, and the teacher couldn't question it, because to do so would be transphobic. That's the direction we're going down. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So it's absolutely essential that there is free speech involved in this. Of course, bullying is wrong. Of course, if you have a trans person who's being just mercilessly mocked and ridiculed, that's wrong. I also think it's wrong to say, for example, that Caitlyn Jenner is Woman of the Year, as was actually, I forget the publication, but a few years ago, Caitlyn Jenner was named as Woman of the Year, not Nadia Murad, not the many, many brave women around the world who are fighting for human rights, for biological women. Caitlyn Jenner, uh, you know, American former Olympian, transgender spokesperson, Woman of the Year. I think that's insane. I really do. So I think that when we're talking about freedom of speech, this is one of the major battleground trans issues. Um, and if you are going to say, "Oh well, you can't have that opinion because it's offensive," then just be prepared to, go down a very dark path. I want to see people in power forcefully speaking out for freedom of speech. And I think these police departments around the country really, really need to get their act together and start showing the public that they care about actual crimes more than knocking someone's door because of wrong thought. This is not yet a totalitarian state.